very shortly.
Just give me a screaming before.
I mean, we could do that. We used to. I don't think we need to do this with Riverside, but we used to do a like 3, 2, 1 clap to synchronize. And if you'd like, we could do a 3, 2, 1 scream. But
Yeah,
yeah,
perfect screaming.
Chris, are you in?
Oh,
Best thread.
now I feel like Paloma needs to turn down a little bit.
All
Oh,
right,
damn. Was the
gain down
scream?
slightly.
Oh, wow. Okay.
All right,
Okay.
so we'll do
I,
we'll
I'm,
do. I mean, this will probably get trimmed from the actual show because we haven't kicked off yet, but maybe it'll go in the outtakes. But shall we do a 3, 2, 1 scream?
yes.
All right. Lean back from the mic when you scream just a little. And 3, 2, 1. Oh!
That was a very good scream.
All right.
All right.
Okay. So we are live. Hello, YouTube. Hello. I should actually double check that it is actually working on YouTube. It looks like it is. All right. Cool. 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 Here we are. Oh, yeah. I just clicked in and it started doing the 3, 2, 1 scream. So we are good to go. Any questions before I kick us off?
No.
All right. Yeah,
I just want to say thank you for hosting because I'm
my
like
pleasure.
too anxious and stupid to do it. So
You are anything but stupid, Chris, but it is a distinct set of skills, and I am happy to do it anytime you'd like an MC.
thank you.
I think you are an incredible color commentator, and if you don't want to MC at the same time as doing that, no worries. Let me find.
I do have to warn you, Chris, that
Hello and welcome to JS Party. I'm KBall. I am your MC today. I am joined by a couple friends here today. So first off, the one, the only, Bone Skull. Chris, how are you doing?
How do you do?
Welcome. We are also joined today by a special guest, Paloma Oliveira. Did I pronounce that right? Paloma Oliveira?
yeah, you can say so. Yeah, very good.
That's a no.
Close enough. Close enough. No. Fail. Well, Paloma, welcome. We're so excited to have you on the show.
Thank you. I'm very happy. Yep. I'm quite happy to be here. I'll jump a little bit. Yep.
Awesome.
That's really
So
happy.
let's actually get started. So I know you've been on a changelog relatively recently, but I think this might be your first time on JS Party. So why don't you introduce yourself to the show?
Yay! So with my pronunciation, my name is Paloma Oliveira. I am currently working as a developer advocate for South Labs. I'm also a PyLadies Berlin organizer. Also I also work to contribute for other side of the web, which is promoting net art and archiving and researching net art here in Berlin for the Zentrum für Netzkunst. I am a cat mother. George may meow during the show. I apologize in advance. It's just like he likes to comment a lot. I am currently living in Berlin, and but I've been all around. I was born in Brazil, so you will hear an interesting accent over there. That's it.
Well, if we get some meows, that'll be good sound bites for future shows. So we can even encourage him. And I hear that you're working on a book. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
I do. It's a very, very dear project. I am doing with the very support of A Press. And James, my editor, is lovely. I just met him at Otto at All Things Open. And it is a book. Well, the whole idea behind is to think about how can we make open source a more diverse and bring more equality to the space. And the whole idea behind and the importance of that is like this thing is the base of the technology industry, which is actually tangible for people's life. but it is a very homogeneous space. How can a homogeneous idea or perception of the world be driving the way we are perceiving and driving our lives? And I mean it, like how tangible that is, how many apps everyone uses for, I don't know, sleeping tracking and making decisions about their own body and the way they move, like how do I move through the cities or for places, or how do I choose the places I eat, for example. I mean, it's very tangible, right? And those decisions should not be made by an homogeneous mind or body. And therefore, the idea of this book is trying to understand how to give a practical, well, first of all, understanding what's going on in this space, understanding why it is important to talk about that, and then proposing actual replicable models forward to improve that. Does it make sense?
We're gonna pause a really long time because even if 100% makes sense, you give such great reactions to that long pause. So this is an area that I know Chris has thought about a lot, that I've thought about a lot, of like, what are the consequences of open source? What are the different sustainable models for open source? Do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about how you came to having this topic area be such a focus for you?
I think it's from my own experience. And so open source to me, it's how I kind of shaped my adulthood. So I've been doing art my whole life, and I learned to do art in hacker spaces in Brazil, where I was very lucky to be in a point of time and of a socio-economic time where Brazil had the left party in government, and they decided to hire a bunch of FOSS, so free and open source people, the very ideological ones, in power, working for the government to make transparent data, to bring that idea of collaboration and working with open and free software inside of cultural spaces. So I was one of these fortunate people to leave that era where we have a lot of support, financial support from the government, to leave that and replicate that and understand that idea so deeply that that became like a way of existence. So I started to do like a art in hacker spaces, reproducing it and teaching people how to do it. And that is a life transforming. I think as soon as you experience that, that kind of shapes everything. But I know how much I was surrounding for people thinking exactly the same, or sort of very male dominant attitudes, and having hard time having, I don't know, experience other type of people inside. And I applied that idea into several spaces inside of the medicine school in Brazil, where we decided there was this med hacker group, which I'm still part of it, that we think how to open the medicine. How do we do that? So in politics and in medicine, in biology, I was fortunate in my master's degree. I was in a university where I could get together with people from biology that was thinking about biohacking and how do you open pharmaceuticals and biological systems. And so that idea was applied for all these parts of my life. And I was wondering that, whoa, so this is not just about software, but it is really how we are perceiving the world and how we are changing, and the whole the possibility of changing the way we react and we live in the world. We live together, right? The power of collaboration. And when I moved to Germany, and I decided that I needed a more stable job instead of just being an artist, and I got my first job in an open source program office, then I was like, oh gosh, that can be applied to business. What does it mean? And then I start to be very bothered and confronted by my ideas that come out from the FOSS space, and asking myself, okay, but it's true, I changed my job because I needed more sustainability for my life. And people are doing that for free, having burnout, being like sustaining a billion money industry, and like destroying like their own bodies with those being overwhelmed. What's going on? And then I start to ask myself, what's going on? and talk to people and try to ask this question. Okay, there's something that is bothering people. There's something very unbalanced here. What can we do? Is there a way to push it forward? How is it? So this is where this idea come from.
That's a really interesting background because from two angles that I see. Of one is coming from the arts side, and honestly, some of the most fascinating talks and projects that I have seen in technology are those that are trying to apply technology to art and use it there. And it just feels like there's so much open space there in a really interesting way. And the second was that it sounded like you actually had government backing, like funding open source as a public square in some ways, which is something I haven't seen much of before. Chris, I know you have also made a very large amount of your career working in open source. Do you want to share some of how your story and how it might be similar or different than Paloma's?
Well, I mean, I came from the traditional like do what you're supposed to do to become a programmer type of thing. So I went to school for it. Like at some point in high school, I decided that, well, I have to make money and I like computers, so I'm going to go do that in college. And there was really never, I was not one of the people who was kind of unsure what they wanted to do with themselves. And so I went to school. It sucked, but I got the piece of paper and, you know, I started in you know, working for companies and learning the trade. But back then, I wasn't really exposed to much open source or anything, and that only happened kind of later in my career. Um, but you know, I do agree with your insight that you know there's a lot of interesting stuff that's coming that has come out of the art space in 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 open source, and you know, especially stuff like processing and Arduino. You know, like processing has its roots in I think like visual art or installations or something like that, and um, you know that's kind of it. You know that the whole Arduino like culture, the kind of maker thing. I mean, that's kind of revolutionary in its own way too. But and that culture is also about sharing, right? And so it's not just software, right? Um, but you know, I guess that's we are JS Party, and so that's kind of our focus, right? So yeah, it's I definitely agree with a lot of the um, um, observations that Paloma has, and she's coming at it from a very different place than I am, and um, it's it's really important to just get those different perspectives, and it's like case in point. This is why we need more diversity in the space because you know I wouldn't have those ideas, you know, and it's just like I think we can grow so much more as a community or you know or a society if we do. But I don't want to like oversell you know how much I feel like you know open source is like it is is important in the relative scheme of things. But you know for someone maybe
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about open source and one sort of loaded thing for it is that in some dimensions, the barrier to entry is very low. There are lots of people who got into the tech industry and sort of access to that life changing tech salary by starting in open source and learning and hacking there. However, both the kind of overwhelming white and Asian male demographics and related cultural pieces, and the very large time investment involved, end up making that much more accessible to a subset of people than to others, right? Like it's much easier to get in that way if you are someone who has a lot of spare time, is comfortable in a relatively, should we say, relatively hostile often culture, or at least one that is very brusque and unlikely to. I mean, some depends on the project, right? Like Linux, I won't shy away from. Linux was a hostile culture for a very long time. You got in there and you had to be ready to be sworn at and like told your stuff was shit and like be able to go with that. And a lot of people that turned them off. I do think there are a lot of projects today. I'm thinking of the Vue community, the Rust community, like that are much more welcoming, and that's a big step forward. But it still takes a lot of time, and you still have to have a lot of sort of freedom and access to get into the industry that way.
Should we move to the second section?
Yeah, let's actually take a quick break. That lets us insert advertising and all those fun things. If anyone needs to run to the restroom, yes, you can do a moment of relaxation, take a deep breath,
Just
dance, whatever helps you. And then we'll be back in a sec.
Okay, big time.
yeah, I mean that seemed like a good place to like
Yeah, oh, good call.
get into
right.
the whole free time.
Yeah. Everybody ready? Shall we kick back off?
Yep.
All right. Well, let's jump back into a little bit of kind of thinking about those impacts of open source. I saw in the notes we had a question of what are the social consequences of producing open source, and I feel like we could attack that from multiple angles. But Paloma, what's your reaction? Where do you want to go with it?
Oof, we gotta break that down because I have so many questions out there. But I'll try to maybe I pointed out like my mind map of the view, and Chris is very good in breaking that down and understanding what I actually mean. so let's understand maybe historical, right? Like we understand so better wrong back then. Software is where all the thoughts start. Software is something that is a benefit for humanity, therefore it's supposed to be free. We gotta make it free. And then we go from that into an inevitable capitalism, consumerism consumption of it and saying, ooh, look at that, free labor. We can take advantage of that. And then you have billionaire industries taking actually advantage of that. It's not straightforward line, and I think there are several small lines in between. But there's definitely, to me, one of to break down is maybe I'm being too punk here, but there's definitely a very worry labor issue there. So by one hand, we know that the industry is based on that. By the other hand, and we need, right, like if you want that to be right, if you want to really use the power of it for the benefit of the commons, and can have the money benefit out of it, someone is having a gigantic money benefit out of it. And we do live in a capitalist society where that's needed for everyone. how do we create equality around that? I mean, how do we have some ethical standards for that? That to me is the most front face social consequences of it. It's actually being acceptable and needed, and people with that understanding that, oh, I have to contribute with open source without even understanding what it is and the consequences, personal or for the projects of it. And I mean that. I've been doing this exercise of offering one-on-one video calls with people to act that people come and like, I want to contribute, I have to contribute. And the first question is like, what do you think it is? What is the cost for you? And it's the first question that everyone step back and say, I don't know, I never thought about that. So when you think about the consequences of producing, I think it became so big that we start to understanding what it means. Not sure if you see that way or if that's just a very punk understanding of it.
I think there's a really interesting thing to dig into here around sort of people's individual boundaries and how they think about it. Because, like, volunteer labor generally is a part of huge all sorts of different things in our society. Right? I have two kids, and I have learned since having kids in elementary school that how much elementary schools assume that there are parents who are not working day jobs and are able to volunteer huge amounts of their time to keep the school running. And it blows my mind how deeply baked in that assumption is. Now, the set of people who benefits is more bounded, right? It's you don't end up with this isn't going to multi-million-dollar corporations. This is supporting your local school. And two, you can kind of bound it's a lot, I think, in some ways easier to bound your scope of involvement, and there's sort of enough community around that not everybody's doing these things. You can get in and volunteer for a couple hours here and a couple hours there. Open source is an interesting example because, one, it is being used by multi-billion-dollar corporations as well, and we can talk about the ways in which open source gets monetized in different ways, or either directly or much more often indirectly as being a foundational piece that lets them move faster. But two, I think that some of the models for engagement are much less healthy for individuals, right? You as a maintainer, if you're a maintainer of a popular project, the scope of your commitment is much less in your control than if you're a volunteer at your local school or some other type of organization.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so if I'm volunteering at my school to help lead a bunch of kids in an afternoon exercise, I can say, all right, I'm going to do this I'll do this for this year or this semester, and I know it's a couple hours a week. And there's not going to be a massive change in the number of kids involved because the number of kids is about the same. It's not going to likely change where there's unexpected requirements coming in. Whereas if I'm a maintainer of an open source project, I may be fine volunteering to support 500 people in a community and make changes every now and then. And if my project blows up and suddenly it's being used by 1 million people and they're all filing tickets and there's security things coming in, like, it's much easier for my sense of obligation to rapidly scale up beyond my personal ability to fulfill it.
So when you talk about when you talk about like the ethics of this, Paloma, are you talking about the ethics of, or I suppose I should say, do you want to talk about the ethics of the consumers, the businesses leveraging the open source, or do you want to talk about the ethics of the producer and what the move fast and break things, and I want to just make this thing, and it just looks like tech to me, and so I'm gonna put it out there, and um, not really thinking about who could use it, what they could use it for, that sort of thing. Because I feel like that has been that's kind of come to a like popular attention around AI, right? You you know People are well aware that AI can be used for evil, and so that kind of community is at least trying to make some safeguards around it. But there's no such thing for just kind of the general FOSS. That hasn't been like traditionally a concern. It's just well, it's just a tool, you know. So yeah. So like, do you want to talk about like the ethics of the people building, or do you want to talk about like it's really not great that you know I feel like we've kind of everybody knows that businesses that are like demanding like all this time out of maintainers, that sucks, right? And I think that's kind of been beaten to death, and I don't know if there's been any great solutions to this, but it might be cool to discuss what those could be. So up to you.
Oof. I mean, I do think it's a fairly complex subject, right? I think this talk, it's not enough for us to find a solution because it's been going on, this discussion, for decades. But one thing that is pretty clear is the imbalance of it. So I think it's in a holistic perspective where we can understand. I will use the intersectionality from my diva Kimberly Crenshaw word, because I think that fits quite in. When you see things not by its parts, but it's a whole, I think it's more proper to investigate a subject such as. And I think most of the maintainers, even though they do it, it's free and someone is taking advantage because the license allows that, they would be okay if the things are balanced. And that goes from the consumer, from the producer, from all parts, right? I think it's like we have two measurements. You have someone giving the best because it believes in the power this can bring for a collective, and you have others that will, by one hand, say, "Oh, thank you, bye," and the others that will say, "Awesome, I will do my best, thank you." Like, sometimes a thank you is enough because we're humans and we are most of the times motivated by this understanding the importance of what we do. I mean, if we take a lot of time to produce something that no one sees or use it, it's super sad. And sometimes appreciation is enough, but now there's a gigantic imbalance. Now you have someone putting their hearts and effort and all the efforts. You have a bunch of people using it and just asking and asking and asking for more because they do not get it what it is. Most of people do not understand how it is being made. And a lot of people trying to take the most out of it without giving nothing back. And that's mostly industry more than consumers. So I think the problem about ethics, it's because we're using different weights to measure the production, the consumption, and the possibilities to use mainly the effort of some or the work of some. This is why I think the ethics, it's by one hand, it's not just that, but it's mostly a work issue. Because it does open up possibility for exploitation that wouldn't in any law, like not even in Brazil, that just like shut off many working laws, you would be able to do that if it was not for open source. So you do open a gigantic fissure for working rights breach, if I can say that. In this kind of, I think the ethic is not there. And this is why, coming from arts, I understand that deeply. It's very alike arts issue. You have zero working rights. People say you have to do that because it's a labor of love, and you still have to pay your rent, right? It's much alike. So I understand
Yeah.
that deeply.
The word you said there, balance, is really an important one. I think there's a dream of open source of being we're all sharing and helping each other. You're working on this and I can use it, and I'm working on this other thing and you can use it, and this kind of beautiful web of, what is the thing between in front of many eyes, all bugs are simple, or whatever it is, and like all these people helping out. But the reality today is you have a small number of people doing a tremendous amount of work and a very large number of people benefiting and often being quite abusive about why doesn't it work on this? Why doesn't it work on this? What's going on? Where's this? And it's really not a balanced environment between maintainers or producers, as you call them, and the various consumers of this software.
Yeah. And not just that, but who's extracting value, right? You know, if I go and contribute to Node, you know, I might get a salary, but businesses build huge businesses on Node and make a lot of money. So, I mean, that's also another imbalance, right? But the sum, when we talk about the sum, do so much of the work. Another facet, of course, and this was alluded to earlier, was that the sum is mostly like white dudes or, Asian dudes, not a whole lot of women. And I think that has tremendous impact on the culture itself of open source, but B, the software that is getting built. I'm wondering, Paloma, if you'd like to speak to that some.
I would love to indeed. That's the other gigantic consequence that is very unseen. So we have painting again the situation nowadays, right? We have this gigantic thing that is being used. There's people all around the globe that it's crazy, that they want to do it. So if we ignore the working rights part, we still have this thing that is driving the industry forward. There is no possible to have technology industry nowadays without open source. And many things, because the thought went way beyond software, many things that's going on in the world that it's not possible to do without this collective presence. But who is shaping it? I mean, from the governance point of view, who are taking the decisions? So it's not just the contributors, it's from the bottom up, down up, who is actually involved in making the decision and creating it. So what does it get, right? Even if we have, it's not just putting more women to code and contribute, because that would have changed a lot, but also how do you make the decisions? Would so much code be actually created if we have a collective thought and decisions around it? If you have more, and I will use a feminist approach, understanding feminism as a theory that will defend a support network, that will understand the value of community-based thought. I'm not just talking about women here. I'm talking about a whole field of understanding of the world that is not just based in competition, nor a leader as like a pyramid of hierarchy, right? I don't know, just make it clear because it can be much broader than that. So if we insert this point of view inside of this industry, how would it be shaped? Because sometimes and I heard that from my friend Cici, that was one of the first Pi Ladies meeting I've been. There was this table of women discussing how could it be more present in the industry and be there. And she's like, yo, why can people not look like me instead of me trying to adapt, be like the other? So I think it's fundamentally and ontological perceiving, like it needs to be reshaped And for that to be reshaped, it is, of course, having boots on the ground, to use a very used expression. People contributing, people understanding, but mostly being able to make the decisions that will, I believe, deeply affect the sustainability of it. And sustainability also broad term, understanding how we are taking care of each other, how is the community being perceived, how much code we are producing, and what's the sustainability of this amount of energy from the green energy being produced, but also how it is affecting people's life and how we're taking care of it. So I truly believe if we put together many people, that it's not just technical, not just white men, not just Asian, but people that comes, just one example, right? Coming from Brazil and having that instituted in public policies, I'm pretty sure my understanding it's so much different than the people that comes from Germany nowadays that I can compare. It's just different. And when you put them together, there's no way you cannot benefit everyone. I don't see a way that it's not beneficial to everyone.
But I think that's a key thing, right? So like, I am a white man. I am that demographic. I'm working right now at a company where like half of the engineering leadership and a fair amount of the engineering team is women. And it's the most diverse engineering team I've ever been on. And I will say that even for me as like that sort of majority demographic, it is the most pleasant work environment that I've ever worked in as an engineer. And so like diverse, even the people who are in that majority group who are, I think, may feel well served by the current environment, like things can be a lot better and more pleasant when you get more perspectives in the room. Um, it's much easier to avoid kind of groupthink. It's a lot of times the things that you need to do to make a place more pleasant for folks who've been traditionally excluded also make it more pleasant for everyone. It's especially like I'm a parent now, right? Like the types of things that I was able to do when I was just out of school and like had all the time in the world and no obligations, like I cannot do anymore. And having a workplace that understands that and respects that is huge. And that's something that I think, coming back to open source, right? Like if our model of an open source maintainer is someone who is spending 18 hours a day coding in their room, like that doesn't work for most people. And it's pretty unpleasant for that person too. So we need to be thinking about a model that is sustainable, that works across all of a wide range of life experience and life circumstance.
When you talk about decision makers, I mean, so there's kind of two ways an open source project happens. One is somebody or somebody's come together and say, okay, hey, let's build this thing. Usually it's one somebody at the start, and they build a thing, and then if they're lucky, somebody will help them with it. And the other way is some company decides they want to build something, and they pay people to build it, and it's driven by the company. It's open source for now, and maybe it won't be later, but there you go. Feel free to contribute. Community of open source contributors. And so who there's the former and the latter. If we look at the latter, we can see that, all right, the decision makers on those projects are essentially project managers for companies, and if women aren't in those roles, or that's not those roles don't have diversity, again, you're gonna see a whole lot of kind of it's going to be very monotonous. And so there's this, it's also coming from industry too. It's like, well, there are certainly, open source is not a diverse place, but neither is kind of software in general. Open source is worse. Um, and so, why is that? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but how do we? So some portion of this is it needs to be. It's like a greater societal thing where women have been fighting for equal pay forever, and even if they do get close to that, maybe they're not those decision makers, right? And maybe they're not in the exec suite that drive the KPIs or what have you, and that makes the product managers make the decisions to do the thing to improve those KPIs instead of literally anything else that could be more beneficial to anything other than the company's bottom line. So there's when you are thinking about, okay, how do we do this boots on the ground thing, are you thinking about, all right, let's do it the other way and start from scratch and not approach or open source like a business would, or are you thinking about, well, yes, we need to do that, but to we also need to be in these positions of power in industry to to be able to create those open source projects and drive them forward.
Chris, to be honest, I think we believe we have to be gremlins in the water. We have to reproduce it all around. I just do like gremlins. But I think strategies needs to go through a diverse of strategies as well. You cannot change anything, and I learned that in arts. If you're talking to you don't know the gremlins in the water, like I think that's water, they proliferate. But well,
No. What? Wait, what?
no,
Okay,
going
Is
back.
that like is that a Brazilian thing?
we need to diverge on gremlins in the water. We can come back to actually trying to make the world better soon. Like, what is that?
You never seen Gremlins, the movie, Spielberg?
Oh, okay. So you mean you get the gremlin wet, and so
Exactly.
you get the mogwai wet, and it becomes the gremlin, and so you're saying by saying that, what exactly? And so now we can go back to the line of thinking.
Yeah, wait, yeah. What are the Mogways? What are the gremlins? Like, where?
Oh, too much free association in my head, but the idea needs to proliferate, right? You need to make it. That was the idea behind. I should just use the word proliferate and gremlins in the water.
But are you saying like we need to blow it up, or you started to say before I got distracted was like you have to come at this from all angles, right?
Exactly. You cannot, no, you cannot just do that and be like a super activist, having written all the right books, published papers, and doing great exhibitions and having one small project for 5 people. You cannot. You have to be in the table. You have to have place in the table where decisions are being made, but you also have to be the one actually writing the texts. I mean, I'm doing some metaphors here, but you have to have your code inside of the line of code that will fix the bug, but you also have to be in the table of the ones making decisions. Otherwise, this won't happen. You cannot have any change without that and without the support of everyone around and creating conscience about why is this important and without people feeling fear of this change. And to be honest, changes it's something that goes very slow in society. I mean, even I heard the other day, like, people are still afraid of open source. Why would you be afraid of something that's saying dangerous? So the changes can be very slow, but for us to make real change, we need to first understand why is this important. So this work of talking about it, understanding why is this important for everyone, why does that brings benefits, and mostly why we're doing that. It's a tremendous. Um, can I? No, forget. I would say something,
You,
but
you
it would.
you can say whatever you want. But you know what? At this point, it might actually be a good chance to take a quick break, and then we can come back and figure out what are all the gremlins we want to throw in the water. What are the different tactics that we as individuals, that people listening can try to help move this in the right direction. All right. Anyone need a bio break or anything?
No.
Okay, we can hop right back in. I just want to give them that cut spot.
Okay. Yeah, it was tense. Ooh, I love those discussions though. I do can go forever on it.
We'll wait for Chris, and then we
Sure.
can jump in again.
Is that a very weird show for JS Party? This theme?
Oh, we go all over.
Yeah, not especially.
Okay.
So basically, I was thinking gremlins in the water. When I heard that, I was like, is that like some old like aphorism from some European country where there's like, you know, old like peasants don't go near the water. There's gremlins in there.
There's gremlins there.
You know, the gremlins will steal your pitchfork, and I don't know. But that's what I was thinking. I didn't I didn't tie the gremlin back to the Spielberg gremlin. So I was very much interested in that.
Oh, sometimes I totally forget. Oh,
Uh-oh, we lost him.
oh, oh gosh! It's been
You
eaten.
scared him off.
It's been eaten by one of the
What?
evil ones.
The gremlins didn't like what he was saying. They came and got him.
Oh gosh. It's so funny, I totally forget. Me and my sister, we have these inside jokes because we do have the same cultural, same cultural thing. So we often say things that to us it's obvious and we forget that not all the world has all the same references.
That's what makes it delightful, though.
It is.
He just sent in the Slack, just ASDGF. Like what? Just like slamming on his keyboard. Oh, there he is. Okay, I have to let him in.
Yellow.
He's back.
I pushed the wrong button.
Okay. We were thinking maybe the gremlins didn't like what you were saying.
No. Yeah. Okay. All right.
All right.
Let's wrap this thing up. Let's
All right.
take her home.
Take it home. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's jump back in and talk about tactical, concrete things that people can do. And maybe we can hit it at a couple of levels. You know, one, if you're just an individual, what are the types of things you can do? Two, if you're someone who's in maybe a little bit more of a position of authority or power, maybe you're a manager, a director at a software company, something like that. And three, because I love your background in like the public, like what sorts of governmental or other public support might we do? Because I mean, this is one thing that has always stuck out to me about open source, which is it's creating a public good, but we don't fund it like we fund public goods, right? Like there's all sorts of different things that we fund as a society through various governmental mechanisms or nonprofits or things like that to say this is something that is good for everyone and we're going to fund it. And open source has very limited amounts of that. There's a couple of foundations, but they're not putting much money in there. So I'm kind of and a lot of times when there is substantial money, it's because this foundation is actually a conglomerate of a set of corporations backing some of their agenda. So anyway, there's a lot of different angles we can tackle it. Paloma, why don't you lead us off? Where have you been thinking about in terms of like practical things people can do to create some change here?
Ooh, so if you're a single person lost in the world, and you think you're powerless, you're wrong. First thing, understand that you have so much more power in your hands than you think, and that comes on. That's a classica. Understand your own privileges, and put the voice of the ones who does not have voice on the table that you have access. Remember that the changes comes on when you have everyone on the table. So invite the ones who do not is in the seat to be in the seat. And that comes in many forms, meaning speaking up for people who are not there, for mentoring people. That's so much important and so much said. Shout out to Chris here for being the loveliest person to work with and for helping me a lot. So I don't know what it means for people, but sometimes just answering a question, it's like enough for people to feel they belong and they know something they didn't know ahead, right? And I mean, I'm a fairly junior developer and I'm a mentor. I know the difference I make to people's life. And so you don't need much to make the difference. If you have some sort of power or if you're part of a project, an open source project, for example, for Christ's sake, follow best practices. You can literally just download models that you just follow. And what does best practice do is that they improve the communication on your project, that make it welcoming for people. It's not much. You just write the README, put the license. The 3 documents that change everything, but that will help so much people to onboard your project. It's not much, right? So you just make the decision and make one contribution to adding those best practices there. If you have some sort of if you're a manager or if you're a company that you have some sort of mechanisms, at Sauce Labs, we have now an experimental program, a fellowship program to help people on board and become contributors and leaders in the open source space. That's supposed to be a replicable program, very low cost, definitely very powerful for change people's life. So I hope that will become a practical model to push forward. I can tell you in 6 months how it went. We will start on December 1st. We're currently interviewing the fellows. But that's low cost, doesn't interfere anything on backlogs or nothing, but you automatically make people under you, hierarchically speaking, become mentors, sharing their knowledge and pushing more contributors and presence in open source. If you're a manager in companies, support your engineers to be part of open source. Support your designers to help with open source design. We need a lot. Help people to promote events where you help them to contribute and ask them why they're contributing. And for that, just easily look to the stack of tools you're using. They gotta be open source. So just contribute back to the ones you're using. And that's a lot. If you're government, well, so behind if you're not doing it, but it is, remember, you government, you work for the public, therefore that should be easily accessible for the public. So if you're not using open source and your data is not transparent, shame on you. Wow, that's a list of things that cross my mind, but I don't know, that's my head. I would love to hear your thoughts about it.
So, the managers. So, and I think the conversations we've had in the past, you kind of know how I approach this. It's in order for a manager to want to do this, and in order for somebody who can allocate resources and yada yada, there needs to be like some benefit for the business, right? There needs to be, because it's all the profit motive. And so what are those things? Like, you can tell them, all right, look, morally and ethically, this would be the right thing to do, but I'm jaded and nobody cares about that. They care about how that's going to benefit the business if they go ahead and encourage people to spend X amount of hours a week on some open source or start contributing to this project we're using. So what are those things?
I mean, I will say, as someone who's worked as a manager quite a bit, the two things that stand out to me are skill development and retention. So, I think open source, already do this a lot when people ask about how to learn more. I say, read more code. And in particular, don't stop at the boundaries of our code base. Read the packages that you're referencing. Go through, like when you're debugging, like be willing to dive down into there. And one step further is like you run into a problem, you figure out how to fix it. The other big thing is that, and I don't know if right now we're now heading into a more recessionary climate. There's a lot of layoffs. Maybe retention won't be as top of mind, but like 3-6 months ago, everybody's like, how do I keep my engineers? They're hopping all over the place. And one way you can keep engineers happy is you give them opportunities to do things they think are cool. And if there aren't things that are cool inside your code base, maybe there are in the open source packages that you're using. And it's, you can even as a manager, like talk up the opportunity. Hey, you can, become a contributor here. It raises your profile. You can maybe go to some conferences, things like that. Like, at least in boom times, that retention argument can be strong. And also to some extent, like the recruitment aspect of it. We let our engineers contribute to open source. You can see their names out there. Like that can be big. I will say that as a manager, also often the most effective thing you can do is reduce barriers to contribution, because a lot of engineers, they're already interested. They want to contribute. And so you say, okay, like it's fine if you carve off 4 hours a week for this or something like this. And like, depending on the size of company, like if you're a large company, you may need to work with legal and figure out like what's allowed and how do you make sure it's okay and this, that, the other. Small companies, it usually doesn't matter. Or at least if it matters, nobody cares. But reducing the barriers, because from what I've seen, for a lot of folks, there is a lot of intrinsic motivation. They think it's cool.
To be honest, I think it's very narrow-minded, the people who gives this answer, like, what is the business I do? It's a super, it's just that idea of, it's very narrow-minded. That's the best definition for it. You will have so much benefits if you just contribute back for the own tools that you use. And as you said, KBall, it's like, it's refreshing. No one, it's too hard to be, and we're just talking about engineers here, right? Like coding all the time for the same project. You need some free space to feel like you're growing. I know a total of 0 engineers that are fully happy just taking care of the backlog of the amount of things to do, because your brain needs some time. So if you're an engineer, go talk with the designer, do some transdisciplinary work and work, because most of the people do want to learn other things, and use this time to contribute to open source back for usually the tools that you use. So we will benefit everyone and all this needed. So if you still think this is not contributing for the ROI of the company, I do think you should open up a space to understand how much that it is beneficial for your business because you're doing that. And yes, that's my take.
It takes a bit of a more long-term view, right? So like when a company is in survival mode, it's hard to make that argument. When you're more in a space of we're investing for the future, we're interested in building a brand as a good place for engineers to work, we're interested in making sure that we retain and grow the folks that we have, which, once again, like economics go in and out, companies go in and out depending on things, but when your company's in that mode, this is like a very effective way to invest in your engineering team. And so if you're in investment mode, you should be investing in open source.
But like now I ask you, because that also comes from my experience. It's like I swear to you, I work 5 times more when I'm happy and when I trust the people I'm at. Like managers I work for, projects I work for free that I spend. I do not even need to sleep because I'm so happy and feel nurtured because I believe on it. While if you put yourself in this stress mode, like, we're in recession, we're growing, that stress just consumes you in a way that is so deeply that you cannot think. You just start to shrink. And that shrinks is on your body. You see people like a curving out. Like if you go from the perspective of the body, you see literally people shrinking out. You see people literally so stressed that they're like in circles in the same problem, an issue and the issue and the issue. You cannot see a light forward. Well, even in recession, I think even economic field, some economic theories will tell you that like open up, do not close down, because that's not beneficial. So that's not actually an argument.
I won't disagree with you about the actual benefits there. I will say it's going to be much harder to convince people when they're in that mode, because those managers are themselves in that reactive shrinking, oh my gosh, mode, many of them. And so, it, as much as I think you're right that like our opportunities for growth are often in staying open in during our hard times, uh, and the more that you are able to stay open to possibility and invest in the future, even when the current times look bleak, the better. It's really hard to make that argument to people who are stressed out of their minds. And the manager, I mean, honestly, like from what I have seen, the line managers in engineering right now are as stressed or more stressed as the engineers in a lot of these companies. Certainly that matches my own experience.
I know, much love for people out there stuck in the stress. And this is the beauty of collaboration, right? This is what being fairly raised in this environment taught me. It's like we're so fixated in scaling up and growing and then you just like share this moment with people, and like I need not much to share, right? And if I share, everyone has the best of it. If we deeply take this collaboration culture forward, this recession mode, and if we go that towards a more fair place, I know this is very utopic and activist from me, but I truly believe that. And if someone has ever lived that experience, we can make a better place for everyone, especially with those brilliant minds that we have around open source. It's like it's a privilege when you can share with people that truly believe in they are doing. It is so special. You potentialize this culture of sharing. Like it's beautiful. It's very powerful.
Even from a slightly more pragmatic place, I've been in the industry almost 20 years now. And a very large number of the people that I know who have been around as long as I am are burned out and completely jaded. And the only way I've seen for me and for many folks to escape that is to focus down on individual people and how you help the individual people around you. And that connection, if you're not getting it at work, maybe you can find an open source community where you can get that individual connection with people who care and that you can connect with.
Well said, KBall.
All right. Well, we're coming up on time. Any last thoughts? Let's actually go in reverse order. So I will go, then Chris, and then Paloma. I've seen many models of open source. I've worked inside a company that had their own open source model where it was like, this is the company's open source, which pros and cons, we've gone over those before. Seen very open community projects, and then there's all these various gradations. But I definitely can say that for me, open source has been a huge positive in my life. And I think as we look at this, the real question is, how do we take that and make it a positive for everyone? And we've talked about a few different possibilities, but I know, it sounds like Chris has been extremely helpful in the community. Paloma is open. I'm open. If people want to get involved and don't know how, reach out. People who are already in the open source community, many of them are very welcoming and would love to help you get in. So that's my thought closing this out. Chris, what's your take on this conversation?
Well, I owe a great deal to open source. but it has to change. It's in many ways it's kind of rotted. I feel like a lot of that early idealism has been lost, and I feel like uh, you know however it is to change in the future. I think it there needs to be something significant, and I don't know what that is. Um, but I'm here for it when it happens, because I think that it's it's I don't know, it can help individuals, and it can help businesses, obviously, but it also can hurt people, and it can be used in a way that is not really helpful for society. So, something needs to change there. And yeah, bring it on.
Brutal. Yeah, I agree with Chris. I This idealism that I do have still lives inside of me, and I truly, truly believe that there's, from a better word, we need to share more to each other, and believe that. Um, but there's something really bad there going on, and we need to speak more about it to find a better solution that it's more fair, and yeah, that is more fair to everyone. And that starts with diversity, but that's also that become has been a has become a buzzword, just like open source. It gets so much popularity that you do not think about the meaning anymore. And I think it is important to invite people for the dance. I forget, I have to quote the one who said that, but many people in DI, in diversity field, says it's not just inviting to the party, it's inviting people to dance. So bringing, it's part of the job, or part of the change is bringing more perspective to the place, to the table, and to decisions, the place where we make decisions. But part of it is actually question and understanding what it means, and the consequences of each line of code we write, any type of project we produce, and why we are creating all of these things. Um, but definitely, it is very powerful. I truly believe in the ethos of it. And if someone wants to get started, I will highly, I can, yeah, I offer free office hours in my regular day job time to do that, to help people think critically about it and actually get started. And I'm here to help.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Paloma. Thank you, Chris, as always. And that has been another episode of JS Party. So join us again, same place, same channel next week. Thank you. This is KBall signing out.
Aw, thank you, Peeps. You're being so lovely. It was such a lovely conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to take us off